Welcome back to The Foundry, brought to you by Forge College. It is so good to have you here. So, if you caught our last explainer, you know we set up the analytical framing for studying Nakamoto Consensus. Well, today we're taking that exact frame and drafting a literal engineering blueprint. We are going to put this beautifully designed consensus machine through a rigorous, break-it-if-we-can stress test. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's just dive right in.
Okay, so here's our blueprint for today. First, mapping attack surfaces. Second, probabilistic finality. Third, the cost of security. Fourth, measuring network stress. Fifth, simulating attack scenarios. And finally, tying it all together.
Phase 1. Attack surfaces. Mapping vulnerabilities. Look, if you've drafted a seemingly impenetrable machine, your absolute first job as an engineer is to figure out exactly where a hypothetical villain could break it, right?
So in Nakamoto Consensus, an adversary could try to compromise the machine in 4 primary places. First up is hash power control, so the mining side. If an attacker gains too much power, they can actually double spend or just censor transactions completely. Second, we've got network layer attacks. This is essentially messing with how blocks propagate to isolate parts of the network. Third are protocol-level parameters, things like block size and interval. If you tweak those, you change the network's entire relay load. And fourth, client and economic incentives, basically the human element, like the temptation for selfish mining.
Now, we can actually turn these abstract threats into concrete, observable signals. It's pretty cool. For example, if someone is attacking the network partition, we're going to see a sudden spike in orphan rates or bifurcated tip sets. If they manage to get too much hash power, well, we'll start seeing unusual chain reorgs. As analysts, we actively monitor for these specific signals. And the best part? Once we spot them, we can deploy the primary mitigation like simply raising the confirmation threshold.
Moving on to Section 2, probabilistic finality. This is all about understanding the math behind our machine's mathematical shield.
I know, probabilistic finality sounds like a total mouthful, but it's actually a beautifully simple concept. Just think of it like a cartoon villain on a slow, squeaky handcar, furiously pumping the handles, desperately trying to catch up to a speeding bullet train. Every single time a new block is added to the honest chain, our bullet train speeds up, and the mathematical probability of that villain ever catching us drops exponentially. By using what's called a Poisson tail calculation, we can figure out exactly how far ahead our train needs to be to feel perfectly 100% safe.
This relentless race really just comes down to 2 variables. P is our honest network fraction. That's the speeding bullet train powered by all the good faith nodes keeping the network moving forward. Racing right behind is Q, the adversary fraction. That's the percentage of hashing power controlled by our cartoonish villain trying to catch up. Literally, the entire math of probabilistic finality is based on this relentless race between P and Q.
All right, Section 3, the cost of security and physical resource limits. Because, making sure P stays larger than Q isn't just some theoretical math problem we solve on a whiteboard.
Security requires immense physical resources. We're talking about literal hashing hardware. Giant warehouses full of ASICs, massive electricity consumption, high-speed bandwidth, and, of course, serious capital. Security isn't just math, it is physical reality. And actually, as a quick aside, if you've been exploring any of the Web3 economics courses and programs over at Forge College, you'll know exactly how dynamic these resource markets can be. A new generation of hardware or just a sudden shift in global energy prices can completely alter the underlying cost curve of our security. So, the absolute magic fraction you need to keep your eye on is greater than 0.25. When an adversary's hash power, our Q fraction, creeps up anywhere between 0.25 and 0.33, they become a very serious threat to our network stability. But here's the really fun part. If a villain actually wants to rent that much hash power, it costs absolutely absurd, astronomical amounts of real-world money. So evaluating security really just means evaluating whether an attacker can economically afford to hit this specific threshold without completely going bankrupt in the process.
Section 4, measuring stress through real-world diagnostics. It's time to put on our hard hats, plug our machine into the diagnostic port, and run some actual measurements.
Now, if you were assessing a suspected stress event, let's say a 3-month window where the network looked a little wobbly, here is your 3-step diagnostic workflow. First, compute the baseline confirmation curve. You've got to know what normal looks like, right? Second, calculate the orphan rate and propagation delay during that event. And third, examine throughput versus decentralization. Like, did the block sizes suddenly go up while the network slowed down?
Let's look at a really concrete example of a stress test in action.
Say our baseline is a perfectly healthy 0.5% orphan rate, with a snappy 2-second average propagation delay. But then, during our stress event, the orphan rate jumps to 2.5%, and delay spikes to 7 seconds. So, why does this matter? Well, a longer propagation delay fragments the honest mining power. While the good guys are sitting there waiting 7 seconds to hear about a new block, they're accidentally mining on old data, which creates orphans. This fragmentation effectively and artificially boosts our adversary's chance of catching up.
That brings us to Section 5, simulating attacks and predicting success rates.
The cool thing here is you don't just have to guess if the villain will catch the train. You can actually model it out with a simple Python simulation. By modeling block arrivals as a Poisson process, we can run tens of thousands of trials. We basically sweep through different values of Q, simulating that race between the honest network and the adversary over and over again. This helps us find the exact empirical probability of a successful chain takeover.
And the mathematical output visually proves that as the number of confirmations, which we call Z, increases, the adversary's probability of success just drops like a rock. I mean, if Q is only 0.1, it takes very few confirmations to be completely safe. But if Q is a much stronger 0.3, you're going to need to wait for a lot more Z's to ensure finality. Ultimately, the math proves that simply waiting for more blocks is your ultimate undeniable shield against an attack.
And finally, Section 6, tying it all together. This is the engineering blueprint. We've mapped the attacks, done the math, measured the costs, and run the code. Now let's bring it all home.
So here is the golden rule for your comparative analysis. Always tie your claims to measurable indicators. If you're going to stand up and claim a network is secure or vulnerable, you have got to show the confirmation probabilities, state your assumptions for Q, and map it all back to observable network variance, like those orphan rates we talked about. Because a claim without a concrete measurement and a solid model backing it up, well, that's just a guess. And we certainly do not guess in engineering.
So, as you look at your final blueprint, I want you to ask yourself this. Does my measurement directly map to my claim? And what further data would strengthen or even weaken my conclusion? Evidence-based analysis is exactly what separates a good theory from an undeniable reality. Thank you so much for exploring this explainer with me today. I highly encourage you to head over and visit forge.college to master these concepts, explore the deeper technical models, and continue your Web3 learning journey. See you next time.